Welcome, everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions.
We are very excited to host today's event, Cybersecurity Masterclass, top IT cybersecurity certifications to get in 2025. Presenting today's topic is Logan Hillard. Logan is a cybersecurity instructor with over 4 years of experience and has worked in multiple security projects. He has successfully delivered numerous corporate training to date for various clients across the globe.
Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. And today's presentation is from the security practice area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com.
This masterclass is designed to equip security professionals with the essential expertise and innovative techniques required to navigate the dynamic cybersecurity landscape of 2025. As vital contributors to this field, you'll explore advanced tools and best practices to fortify your organization. In this session, we'll guide you through the most valuable certifications shaping the industry next year, helping you stay ahead of the curve and boost your career prospects.
Now, I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic.
Hey, Logan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome to this Cybersecurity Masterclass with Netcom. We're going to be covering top IT cybersecurity certifications to get in 2025. So if you're looking to get some cybersecurity certs sometime soon or into the new year, this is going to be a good place to figure out what those certs are and which ones to get in which order. We'll give a breakdown on that. Discussing the agenda. We're going to go basically do a quick overview, very quick overview of the current cybersecurity landscape. That is how the world is at the moment in terms of cybersecurity. We'll talk about some recent trends in cyber threats, as well as the role of cybersecurity professionals. So when you go into the industry, what we kind of expect everyone to be doing. Career benefits, industry demands, and core competencies of several exams. So if you're looking to, again, understand where those exams are, what they require, that's what we'll be talking about. How certifications incorporate hands-on labs and scenarios, just a little bit more detail on those exams. And then, of course, a case study on impact of effective cybersecurity measures on organizational security, discussing how organizational cybersecurity can help prepare an organization for cybersecurity threats. Right. So, overview of the current cybersecurity landscape. So, just to give everyone a brief rundown on what the main teams are from a cybersecurity perspective. Again, internally, these teams are probably not going to be described this way, but when you think about someone's position, someone's role at a company from a cybersecurity perspective, they normally are in one of two boats. They're either on the blue team or on the red team. Now, most cybersecurity experts, most people that you hear that are in cybersecurity are going to be part of the blue team, right? These are the defenders, SOC analysts, even people like systems administrators, network admins, cloud administrators, even roles such as like threat hunters on the blue team side. These can all be considered blue team, again, known as the defense of the organization. These are the guys who are watching the seam. They're watching the alerts coming in from all the real world attacks, and they're trying to mitigate threats as they happen, right? Trying to determine what false positives there are, if any of those alerts are true positives that they actually have to respond to. This is the life of the blue teamer, and it's never ending, right? It's not just we watch it for a few hours and we go home, we call it a day. SOC analysts, this type of work is 24/7 on rotation, right? So you have teams of people working on defending the organization, and that information is monitored 24/7 in most situations because it has to be, right? Otherwise, you're just not quite doing it right. It is a reactive type of cybersecurity posture, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. Now, the red team are your attackers. Again, I'm not saying that the people attacking your organization are red team. What I'm saying is that anyone who is on the organization's side who is performing red team activities would be doing something like an attacker would. So there are red teamers, often auditors, pen testers, more advanced red team related scenarios are known as threat emulation. So basically attacking an organization and looking like an APT. You also have purple teams, right? So purple teams are basically when red teams come together to help blue teams understand how their tools operate and how to make their tools more efficient and to block more real world attacks. So again, that's the red teamer is testing the organization by performing real world attacks against that organization to try to see how the defenses stand up, right? The blue team, they've maybe built the defenses or at least monitor the defenses, but how good do those defenses really perform, right? Because the blue team is just watching. They're playing defense. They're blocking things as they happen. But the red team may say, well, can you block this, right? And that's kind of the difference between the two teams. So with that in mind, both of these teams are on the same team. They're all working for the same organization, trying to increase the cybersecurity posture of that organization. But again, they do it in two very different ways. Okay. So this is kind of a breakdown of a lot of the things that you would see that I've also called out here. This is essentially how an organization prepares themselves for cybersecurity threats, right? One of the first things they work on is compliance, of course, right? Compliance is one of those things where, every organization does it, even if we don't necessarily like doing it. It is normally a hard requirement, something that is actually required for the business, right? So business needs, let's say we're in a specific industry, we're going to have compliance for that specific thing, right? HIPAA for healthcare, There are a lot of the things like the CMMC for government contractors and the like. Again, it's not necessarily going to be fun, not necessarily going to be something that we like to do, but it is very important to do so that we can actually do business, right? So we can get everyone paid. That's full on blue team work. That's not red team work at all. And your auditors and things like that, you can actually kind of think of this as like a non-technical cybersecurity component of the organization's cybersecurity posture, because most of the time, compliance is actually just an interview. Now, there are some compliance that takes a little bit further and says, okay, let me validate that. But for the most part, the auditor is having an interview with someone and checking the boxes, right? Do you do backups? Cool. Do you do full disk encryption? Cool. And if any of that needs to be validated, verified, they'll go through that process and make sure that you are compliant. Right now, again, compliance is just that bar, right? It's just that bar. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be in a really good cybersecurity posture just generally, just because you've done this, right? That's not really how it works. You have to not only perform compliance to do business, right? But you also have to perform compliance so that you can meet that bar, meet that level of requirement. Again, the CMMC, for instance, is one of those pieces of compliance that is not going to be necessarily easy. But again, the things that they require fundamentally are not really the same things that like a red teamer would recommend for an organization. It is still kind of, I don't want to say a joke. It's headed in the right direction. But it is, again, it's that bar. If you think of the Olympics, right? Think of the high jump. If the high jump was always set year after year at like, a certain height, like, call it 15 feet or something, every high jumper would be able to do that, right? Without too much effort. And so it wouldn't really be a very good validation for where the best teams are at, where teams who are taking cybersecurity seriously are actually going to get to. So compliance is that bar, but if you really want to do cybersecurity properly, you need to be clearing that bar and then some. Okay, so compliance is really just a business requirement, and in my opinion, is not an actual valid way to determine cybersecurity posture of your organization. Just because you are compliant does not mean you are secure. And again, I think that's something that a lot of people get wrong. And the only reason that I know this is because I've done red team in my past, right? Because I've seen pen testers and I've interacted with pen testers before on what's actually a good idea and what we need to be doing. When you understand the attack, it's a lot easier to prepare the defense. Okay, so hopefully that was a good representation of where compliance is these days, the current cybersecurity landscape. Training users, of course, is a really big part of your cybersecurity posture. Basically, every single real-world attack, especially as attacks get harder and harder to complete, because of cybersecurity tools, EDR, SIEMs, things like that. Training users is becoming more and more necessary for a secure cybersecurity posture, because without trained users, phishing and social engineering attacks become a lot more prominent. And right now, according to Mandiant, cybersecurity attacks are almost always precipitated with a social engineering engagement. So a real world APT, right, an advanced persistent threat, read nation state, is going to be attacking your users first, not your computers. Okay, it is much easier to attack your users than it is to attack your computers. Let me explain. So if you have a Windows computer, right, by default, it's running Windows Defender, a free version of Windows Defender that is actually pretty good. You could call it EDR Lite EDR being endpoint detection and response. This is like antivirus, but on steroids. So your EDR Lite of Windows Defender running on Windows is actually quite good. So if you're just throwing exploits at that type of endpoint, it doesn't mean that it's just going to pop and you're going to take over the machine. It doesn't work that way, right? What you'll likely have to do is to get a user to click on something, either via an email, a text message, maybe a Slack or a Teams message or something like that. There are a variety of ways to interact with users nowadays, which is actually a positive for attackers. And so users need to be trained on what to look out for. Even further, in a way, not only can you perform user training, but for things like Slack and Teams, especially Teams, you can actually lock down access to new chats from people who are outside of your organization, right? So you can actually have it where your administrators have to whitelist every organization that's going to be interacting with you over Teams. That's pretty uncommon. Not everyone does that. Most people don't do that, but it's a great idea. You know what I heard someone else do the other day? I had an instructor tell me about this organization, and he was trying to send them emails for like a week, and they obviously weren't going through. Nobody was receiving it. So he called them up and said, "Hey, I'm sending you guys emails. I'm getting bounce backs, and bounce back being that the email says, hey, it's not getting to the other side." And he found out that they were whitelisting email domains. So if they had never interacted with you before, they did not allow you to interact without approval via email. That is extremely uncommon, very uncommon. And honestly, if you're doing that with your organization already, you're doing good. That's a great thing to be doing, because again, how do you get around that? You'd have to use You'd have to spoof an organization or take over a target's email from an organization that your actual target organization has already approved and whitelisted. That is a much more complicated methodology, much more complicated. So when you talk about training users, and I guess this actually might lead a little bit more into cloud administration when it comes to Teams policies and things like that in 365. But when it comes to users and access to those users through things like Teams, Slack, and whatnot, locking those pathways down, locking social engineering down to very specific, to only a few different avenues, to breaking that kill chain, really, is extremely important in this day and age for a organization to fully grasp and maintain their cybersecurity posture. Again, what's known as a blacklisting or block listing is just not really conducive to cybersecurity posture these days. Now, again, it makes it easier to do business, but it makes it harder to keep your organization secure. Okay. So don't try to do that. Don't try to do that whitelisting. Don't try to do that allow listing unless you have someone monitoring that, every single day, right? Because again, sales tries to send a new email to an organization. It doesn't go through. Why? Because it's being blocked, right? That would then have to be allowed after maybe going through like an approval process or something like that. It all kind of depends. Okay. Now, again, you may have systems, network administrators. These people might actually be the brains of the operation, kind of building, maintaining, architecting the environment. Of course, they're going to be very important when it comes to cybersecurity posture. They're going to be the types of people who are hardening endpoints, talk about servers, the laptops, the desktops, all those things. Hardening of those machines. Network administrators will be segmenting the networks from each other, right? Making sure that they're not just all one big flat network for attackers to gain access to. Let's have a quick conversation about that. If anyone remembers WannaCry, one of the really prominent ransomwares from the early 2010s, mid 2010s actually, 2015, 2016. If anyone remembers WannaCry, WannaCry was used and abused via the SMB version 1 vulnerability known as Eternal Blue. This is one of the exploits that was leaked through the NSA's TAO, Tailored Access Operations, which is basically the NSA's most prominent team, most competent team. And at the time, they essentially had an exploit that allowed them to access any computer in the world as long as they were directly connected to it on the network. So if they were on a network and your machine was too, they could take it over instantly. And they had that, back in, well, we actually don't really know, 2013, 2012, something like that. So that got leaked in 2014 or so. It then got repurposed by malware teams, especially we think that a lot of the attacks came from North Korea, especially a lot of the WannaCry attacks. And WannaCry became extremely effective, utilizing the SMB version 1 vulnerability to spread throughout environments like a worm, is how those malware types are called. And worm malware is essentially automated malware. So it targets other targets on the local network, and that is why segmentation is so important. Again, if you've never really been told that, you understand the segmentation is important, but you don't know why. It's because automated malware can move and pivot from one machine to another, and when that happens, not only is the one machine going to be crippled, but potentially every other machine that is connected to that environment. That is why network administrators and segmentation are so important. Okay. So you also have reactive SOCs. We kind of talked about this briefly when talking about the blue team and your SOC analysts. But a reactive SOC is very different from a proactive SOC. A reactive SOC is what a lot of people think of when they think of a SOC, a security operations center. And what that means is basically when they see the threat, they respond to it. Right? So threat comes in, alert comes in. They validate, is it a false positive or is it a true positive? Is this real or is it not? If it's real, we need to respond to it and actually do things. If it's not, no worries. Just, delete the alert and move on with your life because it's not valid. So that is a standard security operations center scenario, and that is not, abnormal in any way, right? Makes sense? So a reactive SOC is kind of the normal scenario. A proactive SOC is one that actually includes individuals that can perform certain levels of validation through things like threat hunting to actively search their environment for attackers. And what I mean by that is not in the same way that a reactive SOC would search for it with automated tools running on all the endpoints and things like IDS, IPS running in on the network side. Proactive security operations centers are going to be performing threat hunting, which means the attacker is assumed to be in the organization, in the network, but they are not currently known. So a threat hunter is looking for something, a potential attacker that has bypassed all of their security controls. So just put that in perspective for a second. Think about that. A threat hunter is looking for threats that are currently not visible. So this is kind of the difference between a reactive SOC and a proactive SOC, is that reactive SOCs cannot search for those types of threats. And you could call that you could call those either unknown knowns or potentially unknown unknowns in terms of the types of threats. You have things like known knowns. Those would be signatures. Antivirus could block a known threat, right? You have unknown knowns, right? And this would be things like we don't necessarily know what the threat exists, but we understand its design potentially. It's the TTPs that threat is using, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? Looking for things like IOCs, indicators of compromise. This is what the blue team is actively doing when they perform proactive cybersecurity operations. And again, this is normally done with something like a threat hunter. A threat hunter is going to be able to give the organization that capability. All right. And again, what I really want to show off here a little bit is that these organizations, these methodologies, this cybersecurity posture mechanisms here are almost solely done by blue teamers. Okay, now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is the current cybersecurity landscape. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because blue teamers are good at their jobs. Okay, they know what they're talking about. I know some really good ones. They talk circles around me in terms of current threats and things like that. They're very good, but they don't think about the attack from the attacker's perspective. And because of that, they can sometimes get stuck in the blue team mentality of, well, we need to be doing everything by the book. We need to be doing all these different things. When in reality, the things that actually matter are things that directly stop the threats, right? So the kill chain, the cybersecurity kill chain, first innovated, created by the United States Air Force. The cybersecurity kill chain is basically this idea where you go from the reconnaissance all the way through post exploitation, and you're trying to find individual parts of that process that you could block, right? And if you can do that, then you can stop the attack. And the way that you need to do that is you need to understand what the attack looks like, how the attack happens, so that you can block specific attack points along that kill chain, right? This is how you stop real world attackers, real world threats, and this is how you increase your cybersecurity posture for an organization. It's not through compliance, it's not through just training users, it's not just through cloud administration or systems administration or network administration or even a reactive SOC. You need to start having things like proactive SOCs where they're actually searching for real world attackers, sometimes with real world attackers actually on payroll, so they understand what to look for. And then even further, things like pen tests and the like. Bringing in red teamers to validate your cybersecurity posture is a very, very good methodology. It's what I would recommend to almost every organization because the red teams are going to be a little bit more competent, capable even when it comes to understanding what an attack looks like and how to respond to that attack, right? If I said, well, how would you block a man-in-the-middle attack if you had an attacker on the inside of your organization? If you weren't telling me that you need to be blocking things like NetBIOS, LLMNR, and MDNS, then you're not thinking like a red teamer, right? If you're not talking about things like, if you're not saying, well, how would you prevent a farming attack? If you're not discussing things like utilizing DHCP guard on the switches, again, that's kind of what we're talking about. And again, that's a blue team methodology in terms of the response, but to understand what response to use based off the attack, sometimes those two ideas are separated in a blue teamer's mind, right? Hardening isn't necessarily utilized to block specific attacks. It's just a methodology. It's just a process. For a red teamer, I think of the attack, and then I think of each individual step to block the attack to prevent it. I don't care about whether or not something is hardened through STIGs. I don't care about whether or not you're running the latest and greatest operating system even necessarily. What I care about is how do the attackers operate and how can I block those attacks? That is the difference between the red team and the blue team methodology, in my opinion. Okay. And again, you have a little bit of detail there on exactly which piece of the puzzle that each of these are kind of covering. And you can see some of the stuff that we've already talked about here. Again, getting ahead of myself, but some things that each individual section will be touching on. Again, hardening, segmentation, things like IDS for network admin, the reactive SOC utilizing seams, which are like, basically the SOC tool is known as a seam. EDRs, which are going to be your antivirus on steroids, and then your proactive SOC is going to include threat hunting, pen tests, and other types of audits like purple teams and threat emulation. Okay. So again, you bring in some red teamers, they perform a threat emulation engagement against your organization. They pretend to be an actual APT. They model an APT. It's sometimes known as threat modeling. They model an APT. They create a methodology of attack based off that, and then they try to utilize that attack methodology against your organization, and you try to defend them. And if you can't, then you learned a whole lot. You're going to learn a whole lot about how to increase the cybersecurity posture of your organization by responding to those threats real world. All right. So there we go. Let's talk about recent trends in cyber threats and the role of cybersecurity professionals. So there have been a lot of cybersecurity threats. I was just going over some that had happened recently. And as far as I understand, I think XCUtils was technically last year now, but it's still such a big deal that I keep bringing it up. And eBury, there's a new kind of dump of data that did happen at the beginning of this year. I think it was either February or March, but this backdoor has been spreading since 2009. Okay. So let's talk about each of these individually. This one, actually, I had this slide ready to go, and I had to update it to include the new CUPS vulnerability that is an RCE. Okay, so if you haven't heard of CUPS, it is basically Linux printing. There's one organization of people who are in charge of the CUPS protocol, and as far as I understand, the CUPS protocol is not a very well-designed protocol. And because of that, there are quite a few vulnerabilities that are found in that protocol, and the latest of which is an RCE. Now, if you're wondering what an RCE is a remote code execution. This is a 10 out of 10 critical vulnerability. It is the worst type of vulnerability that you can have on a system. Okay, if you're thinking about basically a backdoor that an attacker has to your system that they can at any moment gain access to your system, that is what RCE is. Okay. Now again, the CUPS protocol and the port that it's listening on and being hosted on needs to be accessible for this attack chain to be possible. But that's all that it takes is access. Once you have access, if let's say that you're like an insider threat or you're an attacker that has gained access to the internal environment, it's all over. If a machine is running CUPS, that machine is owned. As far as I understand, there are still no patches for this vulnerability. Still, and this dropped like last week. It's not good. Not good. Okay, so as the time of this recording, October 4th, 2024, there is like an active RCE for CUPS that is just running amok in the real world, and this is just cybersecurity. If you don't know how this works or if that sounds scary, this is just normal. This is normal behavior for cybersecurity. It's just a little bit unfortunate that we don't really have, because of how small some of these teams are, because of how complicated some of this code is. The code base can't just be like refactored and re-engineered to be more secure. It's just not possible. And anyone that would need or want to do something like that, it would cost them a lot of money, many man hours to really resolve that problem. Okay. And even then, it may not be resolvable with that protocol. It may have to be completely redesigned from the ground up. Who knows? Only developers who look at that code would really be able to tell you what needs to be done. Okay. So, the XCUtils vulnerability, also known as the libLZMA supply chain vulnerability. If you haven't heard of this one, okay, this is the scariest vulnerability. This is the scariest attack that never happened. Okay. We got lucky. Every single person that's listening to this call right now, if you can hear my voice, if you can hear what I'm saying, we got lucky. This could have been so much worse. This could have been, you think that CrowdStrike was bad, okay? You think that CrowdStrike was bad. This would have been on par with the CrowdStrike vulnerability. And it could have been worse than that, honestly, because the result of the liblzma supply chain attack was that essentially an attacker, a real world attacker, potentially a nation state, probably a nation state, would have had access to every Debian system on the planet. Now, Debian is a distribution of Linux, right? If you think of like Ubuntu, Ubuntu is a Debian machine. Kali is a Debian machine. Arch Linux is technically Debian. There's a couple others that I think would have been susceptible to this. But essentially, the uh, the real world, the fact of the matter is that we had one person on the planet notice that something changed after an update. So there is a patch pushed, an update pushed by a real developer that had been working on the project for a few years. Okay, not for years and years and years, but a couple of years, like about 2 years. This researcher, this developer, had been actively helping the XCUtils team to try to gain access to this repository to make updates, to patch it. And basically there was a social engineering engagement utilized against the maintainers of XCUtils. And they literally got the people who were maintaining this stuff for free, by the way. These people are just devoting their time to make sure that these things are done properly. This is a library. liblzma is literally a library of functions that are mostly utilized for compression. So your web page, your website, your device, your Linux machine, whenever it goes to compress a file through almost any means possible, anything that you can really come up with, it's using liblzma, the XCUtils set of binaries, to perform that function, right? To allow that. So basically, they berated the maintainers of this library and basically convinced them that they should allow more developers to get added to the project because they weren't developing the project fast enough. So they used social engineering techniques to basically force the developers to add a malicious developer, an insider threat, to that repository. And then that insider threat maintained it properly with nothing bad for 2 whole years before pushing a vulnerable patch that then got approved because nobody looked at it. And they eventually were able to upload a backdoor that was encrypted, and encrypted, it's called an encrypted blob, which means it's just a section of storage. It's a storage location, and it encrypted itself in the blob, and then it took a key as well, and it took both of those into memory, and then it decrypted itself in memory and then executed directly from memory. So whenever someone went to go look at the code, it was all encrypted. It only decrypted itself once it was actually executed, right? So it was difficult to even notice. But the one thing that stood out to a single developer here, guys, okay, I literally mean that the world could have been turned upside down if not for this one guy. He was a Microsoft SQL engineer, and he looked at SSH logins, and he noticed that after an update, that his SSH logins were 0.5 seconds slower. That is what told him that there was a problem. That is what actually led him to finding out that there had been a malicious update push to liblzma. 0.5 second slowdown in SSH logins. That's it. That is the only thing that stood between a worldwide backdoor getting pushed to every single device and not. And again, this is the type of thing that scares me to the point that that I have to say, like, well, how many other times has this happened? Right? How many times? We literally don't know. We don't. We have no idea. So just when it comes to supply chain vulnerabilities, it actually makes sense these days to start performing like validation of the dependencies. I think it's just called dependency validation. And one way you do this is what's known as with unit testing. And basically, unit testing is every time a change happens, validate the change, right? Look for performance degradation. Look for literally anything, because I don't even know that the malicious developer, I don't even know that they understood that it slowed down the SSH connection. If they would have, maybe they would have made it more complicated to see, you know? And again, if you can't see, if it doesn't have any obvious um, things to look for, any obvious indicators of compromise, what do you do? How do you find it? It's not that easy, right? Let's go ahead and move on to eBury. I could talk about XEUtils all day. The eBury backdoor, again, is likely an APT. And what's hilarious about eBury is that the malware is so old, right, 2009, and they've been finding versions of it since then that literally it's being developed. Like there is a DevOps workflow pipeline designed specifically for the eBury malware. Okay, and what I mean by that is like you can tell that there's a repository because the data, the binaries, the files are constantly being updated. Every time they find a new one, they reverse engineer it and they compare it to the old ones, and they can see that small incremental changes are being made to the code. So there's a code base somewhere. There's a group of developers working on this malware. They're versioning their malware. It's like version 2.38. And you're like, what? This is just like it's like an organization just developing the malware slowly over time, making it better, making it harder to see, right? And it spreads through a variety of means. The reason why eBury is so interesting is because the TTPs, the techniques, tactics, and procedures of the eBury malware to spread from one device to another constantly is in flux. So it's difficult to detect how it determines how it goes from one thing to another. Very, very difficult. And the problem is that the way that it opens up its back door is with OpenSSH, which is extremely common, right? Having SSH open, it doesn't look weird, right? So it blends in. And of course, what does it do? It doesn't actually really do a whole lot in terms of malicious nature. What it does is it adds your device to a botnet. And the botnet allows them to do things like DDoS. Of course, they could probably do more than that, but they're not really using it to like steal information, as far as I understand. They're more using it for other capabilities on the internet, like DDoS, so they could take down targets. They don't need they don't need you to send a whole lot of data if they have millions of devices. And I think as far as eBury goes, I think the botnet has been fairly large in the past, with millions of devices owned at a single time. Okay, very interesting things going on there. The MGM Grand hack. You guys probably heard about this one, but if you didn't, this was social engineering through and through. Just like we were talking about in terms of social engineering, it is probably one of the most common tactics that real world attackers use, especially APTs, to get in your organization. And how did they break through this large company that makes millions of dollars a year, probably hundreds of millions of dollars a year? How did they get through their cybersecurity posture? What did they do? Well, there was a vendor that was interacting with MGM Grand, and the attackers knew this. Somehow, some way, they knew that that this vendor was interacting with them directly. Okay, they knew it. Now, what they did is they pretended to be that vendor, and they called into the MGM Grand help desk, and they said, "Hey, could you please reset the administrator credentials for our vendor?" And MGM Grand help desk said, "Oh yeah, no worries, totally, will do." They reset the credentials. Those creds were administrator credentials. They used those credentials to log in. They then gain access to MGM Grand's environment. They then ransomwared everything, as far as I understand. And then MGM Grand had to rebuild from backups. And that took over a week. And every single day, they lost millions of dollars. I think they were losing almost $10 million a day. And I think they were down for almost 7 business days. So I don't know if the CISO or the CTO got fired or anything like that. But I do know that the current CISO after the incident, whether that was the previous CISO or not, after the incident said that they were going to be taking cybersecurity posture seriously and they were going to start spending money. But what's hilarious to me is that these organizations do not understand that if they just would have spent an additional $1 million a year, just a year, on their cybersecurity posture, they probably would have prevented this. Instead, they spent millions of dollars a day just recovering. And now they're going to spend millions of additional dollars because they're now responding to that threat. They're overdoing it now. And they're going to be buying all the tools. They're going to be buying all the training. Everything's going to get greenlit, and that's cool. But if the organizations, if the real world, if we as cybersecurity professionals in the in organizations that we're working in can help our organizations understand that if they just spend the money now, if they just make the changes up front, they won't have to spend all those monies on the back end to recover, to get to a better cybersecurity posture. That recovery costs a whole lot of money because now people are scared. Right now, people are saying, "Oh, we need to do everything," but where was all that before? Why weren't they training their users? Why weren't they validating, password uh, flips? Why weren't they doing any of that? That's such an obvious thing that the help desk should be doing. Whenever they're giving out credentials like that. But again, without proper training, even the IT team is susceptible to a social engineering engagement like that. So again, very important to understand how real world social engineering is and how it can be used effectively to cripple an organization, even one that makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I think they make that much money. It might just be tens of millions. Either way, it's a lot of money. Okay, if it's on the Strip, if it's on the Las Vegas Strip, they're making good money. So this is just one of those things where it's difficult for me to I feel bad. I feel bad for all the people that had to deal with it. I feel bad for the cyber people that had to come in and clean all this up. The IT people that had to, the architects that sat in on all these calls and said there might have even been people saying, "Hey, you need to make changes." And MGM Grand was like, "We'll do it later. It's fine. It won't hit us. We won't be affected. Who cares?" And then they get owned, right? And there's nothing they can do about it. When you don't take cybersecurity seriously, you are at the behest, you're at the whim of attackers. And who are these attackers? You don't even know. They could be nation states. They could just be randos. They could just be people in basements. You don't know. You don't know what your attacker is going to do. Whenever they target you, you don't know what their intentions are. So again, just spend the money up front, get the cybersecurity posture as needed now. That way you can prevent the attack in the future. Now, it's not going to prevent everything. We may not even be able to prevent APTs from gaining access to our environments. That might be true. We do not know how they operate. Again, you're talking about people like the NSA and Russia's I forget RGU, RUG or something like that. And then I don't know the Chinese name for their organization. India is also up there. They also have large hacking groups. There's quite a few nation states that are involved, to be honest. North Korea as well, of course. We don't know everything that they're capable of. We don't know everything that our organizations are capable of. We definitely probably don't know everything that things like Russia and China are capable of. So it's good practice to say, we don't necessarily know how good they are. But everyone else we can stop, right? Basic social engineering attacks, we can block those, okay? Just through a little bit of user training and a little bit better cybersecurity posture. Now, CrowdStrike, this one, though it's not directly like a cybersecurity incident, it is similar in that, how do you say? It is similar in the way that CrowdStrike is done. Okay, so whenever that update got pushed, there was no methodology to make sure that it didn't bring those machines down, right? And from a cybersecurity perspective, that's kind of like DevSecOps in a way, where whenever something gets pushed, it needs to be validated. You can't just push changes to your environment. You know what I mean? So from a DevSecOps perspective, there was a big failure. And I don't know how possible it would be for a client of CrowdStrike to really do that on their own. But at a minimum, CrowdStrike did not have the necessary methodologies in place to validate whether or not an update would break your machine. And so we ran into a problem where one update crippled entire industries. And we're not talking about like a couple $1 billion in damages. I think we're talking about tens of billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in damages from an update to EDR. That's all that it was. Just one update, right? Now, again, who's at fault? Was this a CrowdStrike problem or a Microsoft problem? I am not the person to ask about that, okay? But I guarantee you that they're going to figure it out in court. Yeah, it's going to be one of those scenarios. It's going to be a crazy scenario, okay? Anyways, the dread of that gave me a hiccup, just a singular hiccup there. I can't imagine having to go through that process and having to figure out who's to blame. And then once they find out blame, of course you're going to owe people money, right? And then they're going to say, well, how do we fix it now, right? How do we make sure this never happens in the future, right? People are legitimately saying we need to move off of CrowdStrike. But the thing about that is CrowdStrike is number one. They are number one. That is a fact. I mean, again, you can create your own EDR company and go up against them. Good luck. But these guys have NSA ties. They understand how attacks really happen. They care about cybersecurity. It's just a fact of the matter. And a single update failure does not change that fact. So again, if you want the best, you go CrowdStrike. Period. So cybersecurity is hard, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, even the things that are supposed to be blocking attacks are causing failures and difficulties for us on the blue team side. Okay, pretty wild, eh? So let's talk about the role of the cybersecurity professional. Whenever you go out into the industry, I want you to start thinking of yourself as a cybersecurity arbiter. All right, and what I mean by that is a cybersecurity arbiter, someone who's going to go interact with, cybersecurity in a very specific way, right? They're going to be advocating for cybersecurity. They're going to be telling people in leadership. They're going to be updating their teams. They're going to be telling their managers. They're going to be telling their friends, their family, right? It's not just at the organizations. It's the people around us too, right? I mean, a lot of people know I'm in cybersecurity. I have a friend that lives right over there, physically a couple blocks down. And less than a year ago, they got scammed out of $22,000 by just a social engineering scam. And I can't tell you how upset I was that not only that happened, but that they did not think to talk to me, right? I would have told them right then and there that was obviously a scam. But because they are in many ways ignorant to what scams look like, to what that process sounds like, to whether or not any of that is even necessary, right? That is the type of scenario where people can get social engineered and they won't really know what to do. But it's just it pains me because I could have told them, right? 22,000, that was all of their savings. It's scary, right? But again, if we don't try, right, the question then becomes, if not us, then who? Who cares about this, right? Who cares about people getting scammed? There's really no one out there that's like, hey, if you get scammed, call us and we'll help you. No. Like, what do? Oh, you got scammed. Sorry, happens. In this day and age, happens to everybody. That's not really a great outcome. You know what I mean? So whenever we start to, understand cybersecurity things that are happening in the real world, we kind of need to take that on a little bit, in my opinion, and become cybersecurity arbiters, people who try to combat cybersecurity ignorance, right? Because that is fundamentally what leads to incidents, is ignorance of cybersecurity methodology, cybersecurity, everything, right? It is the thing that leads to incidents, without a doubt. And by increasing awareness, we can create a scenario that has less incidents overall. We can do that. We can be the change that we want to see in the world by bringing that awareness to people. Again, anytime I have the capability, the opportunity, I talk about cybersecurity all the time. Yes, of course, I'm a little bit, I care about this industry. Obviously, I'm a little bit, you could call me passionate, I think would be a fair statement. Um, but again, it's really just about, I know that people don't know any of this, right? The general population and even people in IT and cybersecurity are not necessarily fully aware of not only what's happening, but of the gravity of what's happening, right? Being able to have that conversation about all the types of cybersecurity incidents that are affecting real world organizations, that's, not most people can do that. Most people just understand, the more the basic stuff. And of course, not only does it save companies money, but it helps keep your clients secure. And in a way, even further, it helps keep those jobs secure. You know that organizations can go into bankruptcy through a cybersecurity incident? It happens. So a failure to meet cybersecurity obligations for an organization could lead to the loss of jobs for innocent people working at that organization, right? Did Becky in HR deserve to get fired because the leadership was not spending money on cybersecurity operations? No, it's not. It's not Becky's fault, right? That's not how this works. They're just an innocent, bystander in the game of cybersecurity. And in my opinion, if we can reduce that risk by increasing cybersecurity posture, by advocating for cybersecurity resilience and increased cybersecurity controls at the organization, if we could do that, we should. If you are in leadership and you have the capability, the potential to listen and to advocate for your cybersecurity professionals that you are already paying for, hopefully you have some on staff. If you're capable of listening to them, then you should, right? And you should take their advice, realistically, critically think about what they're trying to tell you and bring that to the rest of leadership to get that approved for the budget. Okay. Because again, you're not just paying them. They're not just telling you those things because they want to. They're not just saying, hey, you need to spend $250,000 more a year just to get a SOC up and running because it is the bare bones basic requirements for a reactive SOC. And that is just the beginning. That is the type of thing that a blue teamer will tell you need to do, or even a red teamer will tell you need to do. And if you don't do that, you're not really taking cybersecurity seriously. And you might be saying, isn't $250,000 kind of like a lot for like a medium-sized organization? Yes, but it's expensive. Cybersecurity operations are not cheap. If you're making a few million, you should be able to find the budget. Okay, even if you have to start small, start somewhere. Do something. Don't just be like, it's not going to affect us. Those are the types of organizations that are going to get hit. And then you're going to get ransomware. And then it's going to be on you, right? Especially if you're in leadership, if you're a CISO or a CTO, and you're the one making those decisions in writing that we don't need more cybersecurity controls, that we don't need to be securing our organization, increasing the cybersecurity posture. constantly over time performing defense in depth, if you're saying no to that and then you get owned, who's going to be the one who's going to be losing their job, right? In a way, that's the whole point of leadership. A CISO is literally designed, that role is designed to get fired in the event of a cybersecurity incident. Who takes the fall whenever an organization gets owned? CISOs, right? Maybe CTOs, but mostly CISOs. That role specifically, if you talk to, I saw this, they were asking similar questions, and it was this group of cybersecurity professionals preparing for the CISSP, of which I have, and the most of the people in that community, they all said it's the CISO's fault. It's not the blue teamer. It's not the red teamer. It's not the systems administrator. It's not the auditor. It's not the compliance expert. None of those people are to blame. It's leadership that is to blame when things like this are not pushed. So again, if you want to point fingers, if you want to point blame, the only location to point that to is leadership. You can think about that in two different ways. Leadership is not approving things. That's their fault, okay? Or cybersecurity professionals are not even making recommendations. That is also leadership's fault because they are not hiring properly. It all comes down to leadership. So again, this is not one of those things where, and I fundamentally agree with this wholeheartedly. This is not one of those things where, oh, blue team let in an attacker, it's their fault. Heads need to roll. We need to fire people from the blue team. No, that is not how this works. That is not how cybersecurity works at all. Fundamentally, just not realistic, not congruent with the real world aspects of cybersecurity in any way, shape, or form. Leadership is to blame whenever blue team doesn't block things. Okay, the CISO is to blame. So if you want to become a CISO, just be aware that if you're not listening to your team and then you get owned, it's completely your fault, like 100%. Okay. If you're not hiring properly, there could be a couple people to blame, but still generally going to be leadership's fault. All right.
So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then I'll start on the remaining topics after the break.
Sure, we are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue from where we left off.
So let's kind of move on a little bit here to career benefits, industry demands, and core competencies of several of these exams. This will probably be what we talk about for most of the rest of the time here, along with a couple things at the end. But a lot of the government industry stuff specifically has some hard requirements on certifications. One of those major ones that most people have probably heard of is Security Plus from CompTIA. There are DoD standards that are required. Basically, if you want to get a certain job, you have to have these certifications. It is a hard requirement, not like you probably need to make sure you get it. You can't even be hired without it. Okay. So it's similar with pen test. There were CEH requirements. If you guys have heard of the certified ethical hacker from EC Council, Pen Test Plus now covers that, and I don't really recommend the CEH anymore. The CEH has fallen off a little bit. The EC Council basically overcharges for the exam and doesn't really bring a whole lot of value. The government still recognizes it, but they also have started recognizing other exams. And in my opinion, the Pen Test Plus is a better exam than the CEH, and it covers the same thing that the government requires for those roles. So if you get the Pen Test Plus, it's like having the CEH. Go Pen Test Plus. You won't be upset about it, and it's cheaper. Okay. And it covers the same thing. And in my opinion, it's literally just a better exam. Sorry, EC Council. But again, CompTIA coming through, you have competition. Welcome to welcome to capitalism, right? You have to stay competitive. If someone undercuts you in terms of your cost and makes a better product, what are you going to do? Right? You might start stagnating. So hopefully CEH really starts updating their material so they can get back into everyone's good graces again, because it's not just me. The CISSP, this is also another really big deal because it's more of like a management, like top-down cybersecurity certification. It allows you to understand things like frameworks, compliance, like how to organize cybersecurity posture for the organization as a whole, rather than just fixing individual techniques, more like Security Plus and Pen Test Plus would cover. CISSP are more top-down. Those are more bottom-up in a way. All right. Security Plus is really just the language. Same with Pen Test to a degree, but they both cover a lot of really good technical things as well. Okay, so those are going to be some of the requirements, some of the demands of the industry, some of the benefits of getting some of these cybersecurity certifications are, of course, it's going to open up new opportunities, right? If you go on the government side, crazy opportunities. If you get Security Plus and like maybe a couple other exams, you can actually go overseas and work in the Middle East, and you can make really good money. If you're young and you don't have a family, you could easily make like 170 to 250 because of things like hazard pay, because they'll send you to like war zones and things like that to do technical operations and things like that. And you obviously probably won't be on the front line, but you may be at like a base, and you can make a lot of money doing that. There's also opportunities that require things like secret and top secret clearances, of course, and those obviously pay better, and they have less stringent requirements because there are less people with that clearance capability. So if you have the clearance and you have the certs, huge opportunities are going to open up for you, huge in the government side. Okay. It also just helps you develop, standardize a baseline cybersecurity skill set. If you're trying to get into the cybersecurity industry, take some certs. I don't recommend that you go to school. Okay. Don't go to like a college. Get some certifications, get some real world experience, and you will never look back. You don't need college credits. You don't need a college degree to get into cybersecurity. Most people are self-trained. Most people don't even have cybersecurity certifications, especially those on the red team side. And again, I'm not talking bad about blue teamers here, but red teamers tend to be more technical than everybody else. And most of them don't have any certifications because they don't believe in them. And they don't have any schooling because they probably don't believe in schooling either. Most of the people that I interacted with, especially on the private sector side, they didn't have any of that. They were just pen testers. They just knew how to hack systems, and that was it. And yeah, again, if you tried to check them on their knowledge, they would end up checking you. And of course, if you're trying to get if you're trying to perform hiring, right, the benefits of these certifications is that from like leadership perspective, you can look at this as it being a form of validation for skill sets for your new hires, right? If you're trying to hire more people, increase your cybersecurity posture by bringing on some professionals, paying for that salary, right, which is a very good idea, highly recommend that, then you can use these certifications as a validation for that skill check, right? Do they actually have the skills? Did they pass the certs? Not always one-to-one, okay? This is why pen testers don't always like certifications, but it is a pretty good place to start. At a minimum, they'll have the language down. At a minimum. Okay. So let's talk about some of these cybersecurity exams in a little bit more detail, and then we can go from there. All right. So the Microsoft SCI or the security pathway for the Microsoft certifications. These are, as you can see, there's a little breakdown of all of them over here on the right, and a lot of them actually have exams that are associated with them. Not all of them. The applied skills at the end, I don't think have exams. And then that first one, concepts of cybersecurity and the governance and protective sensitive information in the age of AI. I don't think those ones have exams yet. I think they will in the future. But the other ones, SE 900, SE 200, SE 300, 400, AZ 500, and the SE 100, of those, I have my SE 200, and it was a very technical exam, very technical, very difficult to pass, because you have to learn things like custom query and Microsoft Sentinel and the like. But Microsoft has a lot of these core security training exams, and they cover a lot of the stuff that would be necessary for you to understand cybersecurity models with Azure, right? With the Microsoft CSP platform, cloud service provider platform. So SC300 is going to be identity management, things like Entra ID and the like. SC400 is going to be compliance, so things like 365 data with Purview, right? And then AC500 is going to be implementation of security controls and understanding security posture across the organization as a whole, including like applications and things like that. And then SC100 is basically everything: cloud adoption framework, well-architected framework, Microsoft cybersecurity reference architecture, basically a top-down approach to design and modeling. SE100 is kind of like the most complicated. It's the architect level certification for Microsoft. SC200 is more like the SOC analyst. If you really wanted to train someone on the Azure platform for a SOC analyst role, they would get the SC200. And again, that would be maybe level 2 or level 3 even, because it's more complicated. There's something like the SC300. Again, it doesn't always make sense when you think about, where is the SC300 going to be in terms of difficulty? Like, is it harder than the SC200? The answer is no. The SC200 is going to be more complicated than the SC300 and the SC400, and probably the SC500. But I don't think it'll be harder than the SE100, just because that's that architectural, that expert level training. Okay. And again, it's going to be talking about all of their themes, their Microsoft Defender 365, now known as Microsoft Defender XDR platform, as well as Microsoft Sentinel and the like. Okay. That's what all of those certifications are all about. If you're looking to go Microsoft and you want to understand cybersecurity from Microsoft perspective, this is probably a good methodology, a good way to go. Now, AWS also has their own certification for security. Theirs is known as AWS Certified Specialty. And again, it's going to be some of the basic stuff. As far as I understand from a CSP perspective for cybersecurity operations, AWS is more of the, they're actually going to be the, their methodology is let other vendors kind of take care of it. And what they do is they allow those vendors into their space, into their ecosystem, and it allows you to choose which vendor you want. So if you want to utilize, I don't know, like Sentinel One or something like that, or even CrowdStrike, probably inside of AWS, they will likely, I think, have a tool, an application that you can just utilize. right? And now you can start using that in your environment. But AWS doesn't really handle that on their own. They provide a methodology for you to interact with other vendors to handle it together, right? Whereas Azure and Microsoft, they all kind of do it in-house. They have their own system, their own platform for it. AWS allows other vendors to come in and kind of like add to their platform by providing you the capability to say, I want to use these guys for my EDR. Whereas Microsoft is like, well, here's an EDR platform. Here's an EDR product. You can use this anywhere. Microsoft says you can use Defender for AWS, for Google, for Oracle. All of that is allowed. But AWS says you could use anybody. Right. So Microsoft kind of gives you a platform. AWS kind of stands back and gives you access to an ecosystem, right? Pretty interesting separation in design, really just because I think AWS didn't have any of that like in their wheelhouse. But what they do have is they have connections in the industry and they can get people involved, right? So again, and this will kind of cover some of the basic stuff that is possible, like data protection mechanisms, data encryption, things like data storage. I'm sure that they would cover, like everyone has probably heard of AWS Glacier. It's like a cold storage that they utilize that's really, really, really cheap. Those are probably types of things that the AWS certified security specialty certification will cover. Okay. The ISC squared, CISSP, and CCSP. These are kind of similar exams. They're a little bit different generally, but the CISSP is the most well-known one here. This is the one that I have. And you can see all those domains that it covers, right? Security and risk management, asset security, security architecture and engineering, communications and network security, identity and access management, IAM, security assessment and testing, security operations, and software development security. So all these domains, this is varied, right? This isn't just like one person's job. CISSP covers everything, like really a lot of the things from a cybersecurity perspective, the CISSP covers. Okay, so again, it's that top-down approach. Is that we're gonna learn everything. We're gonna be like, like a CISO with their CISSP would be a great idea because they would be able to understand the types of things that everyone is talking about, right? If they have to go and sit in with some developers, right, that's domain 8. If they got to go to talk to their SOC analyst, hey, that's domain 7. They got to talk to some of the people using Entra ID to validate, IAM and things like that. That's domain 5. So they have all of this like capability and language that they can use to interact with users in their environment, right? They're cybersecurity professionals in their environment. This allows having the CISSP gives you the language to have these types of conversations with just about anybody. Okay. And again, you can see some of the requirements there on the right. 5 years of required work experience before you can take this exam. You can't just take it. You have to like be in the industry. It's also difficult though, so that makes sense. It's ANAB accredited, which is a big deal. And then it's also US DoD 8140 sponsored. So approved by the Department of Defense. If you're trying to get approved for certain job roles, they will say 8140 on them. And you will actually have to get one of these certifications to be able to get that job. Okay. So again, very big deal. ISC squared is a really big player in the cybersecurity certification industry, and is definitely one of those industries, not one of those certifications not to sleep on. In my opinion, okay, because I have this certification similar to the SC200, I feel like I could talk about it. The CISSP is not necessarily a super technical exam. It is much more so like a language exam. You have to know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you're never going to pass it. But if you have the language down, easy. Okay. That's just my opinion. A lot of people say it's very difficult. I didn't necessarily agree from a technical perspective. From a language perspective, for sure. But from a technical perspective, not necessarily. Okay. Now, again, EC Council with their CEH, they are recognized by the Department of Defense. But again, so is the Pentest Plus for, I believe, the 8140 as well. So just be aware of that. But the CEH is one of those where a lot of people know it, a lot of people recognize it. I just don't think it's as good as some of the other options. Okay, that's just my opinion. There are quite a few scenarios where um, where I have heard about people trying to like make changes to the CEH. They will hire instructors basically, and they'll say, "Hey, can you help us update it?" And then just like nothing really changes. So I think that that's slowly changing over time as well. I think they've added some new labs. So again, to their credit, they are making changes based off of what people have been saying in the industry. But again, it's going to be slow for them to kind of recover their brand. All right. Now, again, if you're trying to get a job, that may not matter, right? So if you're like, hey, I need to be 8140 approved, boom, take the CEH. It's going to be very easy on the level of like a Security Plus in terms of difficulty, which is pretty low because it's just a language exam. It's not a practical exam in any way, even though they call it the practical. As far as I understand, this is not the same thing as an actual practical exam. Something like the OSCP or the PNPT or the ECPPT from INE. There's a couple other more practical exams that are environments. You actually have to hack them and own them or defend them from the blue team side. This is just a question answer, A through D. Okay. Now, Cisco also has their own implementation, Cisco CyberOps Associate, and this one again is from Cisco. So a lot of their stuff, they've been releasing more and more cybersecurity stuff lately for free. And I don't know, this one I don't think is free, but a lot of the training, all the training for it is. So if you want to do some like free cybersecurity training, Cisco is hosting a lot of stuff on their website that's absolutely completely free, which is kind of cool. Does it mean that it's good? It's pretty good. It's just it's not best in field, best in class, or anything like that. But it is interesting. Again, feel free to take a look at that one. I think less people are kind of in the know about the Cisco certs than they are some of the other ones. But it's good to understand kind of the lay of the land when you start to go look at, what certs can I even go for, and how well known are they? I would say this one is probably towards the bottom in terms of being well known. Okay. Same with the CCNP. I think this one is probably more well known than the other one, and it covers some more common threat vectors and things like that, like VPNs and encryption and the like. Securing the cloud, content security, stuff like that. So it is kind of interesting, some of the stuff that they cover for sure. CompTIA, of course, right? 8570 for the CISA and the CISP Plus. These are both 8570 approved with the government, which is a really big deal. So if you need that requirement for the DoD, then CompTIA, CISA, and CISP Plus or CASP are both really good options there. CISA is basically your Security Plus, but your blue team version of it. Security Plus is more just like cybersecurity language, but CISA really covers like blue team, real world blue team stuff like logging, understanding how to read logs, understanding how to perform threat assessments, risk management, risk mitigation, all the blue team related stuff that you would expect. That's what the CISA Plus is going to be covering. Okay. Really good certification from CompTIA. If you're trying to be a SOC analyst, this is what I would recommend you start with, because again, it really breaks down and helps you understand the language of that role of this industry. And here's just a small tidbit on all the options here in terms of all the payment scales and the types of jobs in the government. You have these. They are referred to as like categories and specialties and position levels. So you have like IAT level 1, IAT level 2, and IAT level 3. Those, in order to get those roles, you have to have one of the certifications in that tier. So if you want to go IAT level 3, you either need a CASP, a CCNP, a CISA, a CISSP, a GCD, GCIH, or CCSP. And that's kind of just how it goes. right? And you can see that like the CISSP is actually really well compensated. If you have that, you can go for like level 3 pretty easily on both of those. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's difficult, but that's just kind of how it works. Is once you understand the certification that you want to get, or really the role and the certs that are required based off of these approved baseline certifications, then you can really determine like what you need to do for your career, right? So this is a really good way to understand, like especially when you're looking at those DoD roles or even DoD like government adjacent roles. Sometimes they need to have this stuff too. You can start to think about it like that. This can really give you insight into which certifications you should really be going for in this industry at this time. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So how certifications incorporate hands-on labs and scenarios. Now, most certifications are mostly just, A through D, question answer, right? But especially CompTIA and the like, they include a lot of scenario-based questions. These are known as PBQs, or performance-based questions. These are harder. They're things like drop downs. They're things like drag and drops. They're things like, a small environment where you have to like interact with a couple things and manipulate firewall rules. I remember this one from Security Plus where you have access to a couple different machines via the terminal, and you have to run commands like ifconfig and like show firewall rules, and then you have to see the information and say, okay, which of these firewall rules is broken after interacting with a real firewall over the terminal, over CLI. And so those are the types of PBQs that you can run into. It feels very real world, and I think is a great way to really validate that you know what you're talking about. On top of the PBQs, of course, some of the material is not just going to be questions to prepare you for all the questions on the exam, of course, but it's also going to be like hands-on labs. A lot of the organizations, a lot of the training facilities have started providing hands-on labs to students now. And the whole point of that is to get real world experience, right? To go through the motions, to validate that you can actually do the things that we're talking about. Even if the exam doesn't cover it directly, they're wanting people to get more real world experience. That's the whole thing. Selling that is a big deal these days too. Definitely a really big deal. And again, the whole idea with all of this, the PBQs, the hands-on labs, the training itself, all the material that comes along with it, the whole point is it is designed to prepare students for real-world application. It's not just about theory. This isn't college. We're trying to prepare users. We're trying to prepare students to take on real-world problems, right? Because if they can't do that, what's the point of all this? Okay. All right. So let's talk about a case study here. All right. We may spend a little bit of time on this one. Just bear with me here because this is kind of it's a big conversation. And there's a lot to discuss. So I'm not sure if everyone heard about this, but this is a real incident. Happened in 2013. Target had a data breach, and it basically kicked off supply chain defense. Nobody had really thought about supply chain stuff until this point. Okay, supply chain was not really on anyone's radar until after this incident, and this is what happened. Okay, so Target, one of the largest retail chains in the United States, experienced a significant cyber attack during the holiday shopping season in 2013. The company handled millions of transactions daily and stored sensitive customer data, including credit card information, right? So that's really not that big of a deal, right? Pretty common. This compliance for credit card stuff would be PCI, by the way, PCI compliance. So the incident was attackers gained access to Target systems by first breaching a third-party vendor, an HVAC company that provided services to Target. So basically, AC component. It was like a smart device. It was like an IoT device that was connected to like their AC and their air filtration services in their buildings, right? So a third-party vendor had been breached, and that third party was providing services to Target, right? Basically, this smart device, this IoT device. This weak point of entry was used by the attackers to install malware on Target's point of sale system. So essentially, those IoT third-party HVAC devices were not segmented on their own network from the POS systems, the point of sale systems at Target. And that malware was able to gain access to the POS systems, allowing them to steal 40 million credit card and debit card numbers and personal information of 70 million customers. That's a lot. Okay. That's not like a few thousand. That is like all of them, right? That might have been basically every customer that they had ever had. So when you put that in perspective, like, not good, right? I could even say very bad in terms of the outcome. So the problem here really is that the end result here is that the company, the design of the infrastructure, of course, changed, of course, because they realized that things like this have to be done properly. And then they started looking at vendors, right? They started looking at these third-party vendors as potential threats, potential threat vectors, right? Now, an HVAC company, an IoT device, something that you thought was just a tool that you were going to be using at your organization, is now being used as a vector into your organization by attackers. This is a big deal. This changed everyone's opinion on supply chain attacks, and was ultimately very responsible for us having these types of conversations now. This is where a lot of this began. Okay, so let's talk about some of the after actions taken, some of the lessons learned by Target and the industry at large. So of course they hired external cybersecurity firms to investigate. Most of the time these are going to be blue teamers in the IR space, the incident response space, but sometimes those blue teamers are actually red teamers. Red teamers are pretty good at IR. So of course, they hire people to investigate. They also increase network segmentation to isolate those systems from each other. Again, why they were on the same network to begin with, nobody will ever know, right? They just weren't thinking about it. It wasn't a problem. They didn't foresee it as being a potential problem until they got owned. And now this is pretty common. This is a common technique of knowing, hey, these two things should not be directly connected, like at all. Improved vendor management and monitoring process to ensure third-party security. You may actually be prompted by these large organizations to perform like a pen test against your product before they purchase it, so they know that you're not, implementing a bad cybersecurity posture and making their overall posture decline, get worse, just by adding in something that isn't very secure. So they actually they have the capability. It's called right to audit, and it's going to be in the contract. And if they think that there's a problem, they will audit your tool, and they will make sure that your tool does not, have any obvious cybersecurity flaws. And even if it does, they will completely segment those tools from anything else that they're using, right? And they may also turn down, if it's bad enough, they may say, this isn't going to work, guys. We're going to have to, deny you guys as a vendor because you're not secure. So security is becoming a much more prominent aspect of even things like business, right? Like in order to get a job, in order to get a contract with larger entities that care about cybersecurity, and Target has a fantastic cybersecurity team, by the way, because of things like this, actually. They take this very seriously, and you can lose business if you don't, right? So they introduced a new EMV chip technology for more introduced the new EMV chip technology. It's the thing that you guys saw, the bleep, but the problem with those, like as far as I understand, is that that information can be stolen with a reader. So what I recommend is, if you are keeping it like on your person, I recommend putting it in a how do you say? I recommend putting it in a secure wallet that does not allow RFID to get out of the wallet. So if someone bumps into you, they don't accidentally steal all your credit card information, right? So again, there are pros and cons to the new chip technology. Just be aware of them, okay? So let's see what it actually cost Target. They of course they did the lessons learned and all that's great, but what did it actually cost them? So that breach cost Target over $200 million in legal fees, settlements, and compensation. Of course, at the time, nobody may remember it now. Remember that shoppers and the like don't necessarily have long-term memory, right? Individuals can be smart, but populations not necessarily. Okay, so their brand reputation did take a significant hit in the cybersecurity space, which led to a very temporary decline in customer trust, but not it was very temporary. Stronger cybersecurity measures and ongoing improvements, they regain that confidence with ease, and they have strengthened their overall security posture. And they've actually become a major player in that space for cybersecurity. They care about cybersecurity to the degree that everyone that works with them, they have to care about cybersecurity as well. They're really pushing their vendors to go above and beyond to increase their cybersecurity so as not to, cause more irreparable damage. Right? It's already bad enough. We don't need to do more. Right? It's just not necessary. So the results of that breach are kind of a big deal. I mean, $200 million. And all it was, realistically, what was it? At the end of the day, the problem was network segmentation. And a red teamer would have looked at this environment and said, obviously, it shouldn't be set up this way. Blue teamers are probably the people who set it up this way in the first place. So again, you have to kind of think about sometimes it's not even like ignorance. Sometimes it's just bias, right? Maybe it's just like, well, it's always been this way. Why do we need to change it? Well, it's not that big of a deal. No one's going to hack us, right? Those are the types of things that can be construed as bias for an organization. And yeah, that's a problem, right? You need to make sure that your organization is not biased. And the way you do that is you bring in outside support, right? Hire external cybersecurity firms in the form of things like IR, cybersecurity architects, red teams, right? Pen testers, auditors, and the like to validate your cybersecurity posture. Don't just say, oh, well, our blue team says it's secure. It must be secure. No, validate that it's actually secure. The way you do that is by bringing in red teamers, in my opinion. There are other ways to do it, but that, in my opinion, is the best way. So what is the key takeaway from this? As cybersecurity arbiters in our field, what is our takeaway? This case demonstrates how a security vulnerability in third-party systems can lead to catastrophic consequences for a company. Catastrophic being, of course, their brand and everything, but $200 million is nothing to shake a stick at. That is a lot of money for such a small problem like lack of network segmentation between two obviously should have been segmented networks. That is a huge consequence, $200 million. Investing in robust cybersecurity measures and managing third-party risks are crucial for protecting customer data and avoiding massive financial and reputational losses. Because again, if you don't do that, it is going to happen to you. If you're a large enough organization, you're going to be found at fault. It's just how it works. So if you don't see this case study from a leadership perspective, and you're not worried about what your organization could be doing better, what should be improved, right? If this stuff doesn't keep you awake at night, you are not taking it seriously, right? Cybersecurity is not just a one and done type of scenario. Cybersecurity is a constant problem that has to be addressed. You have to constantly be tracking new cybersecurity threats. You have to constantly be making sure that your team is trained. You have to constantly be training end users. You have to constantly be making sure that you're using the best and the the best in field, cybersecurity technology, cybersecurity controls. You really have to take it to the nth degree to do this properly. And that is going to cost you money. Is it going to cost you $200 million? No. Right? They could have spent $200 million on cybersecurity for the next you could probably say 2 decades, and they would have been fine. They probably could have spent $1 million to $2 million additional a year on cybersecurity, and they would have had someone come in and tell them that that's a bad idea. So they would have fixed that. They would have increased their cybersecurity posture even further. So they would have fixed all that. And again, any organization that understands how this works, that cares about cybersecurity, will understand what I'm saying. You spend a little bit extra every year in and year out, and you avoid that big number, that big scary number. It never happens. Yeah, you might get owned. You might have smaller things happen, but literally, cybersecurity prevents, it mitigates attacks. Is one of the major functions of cybersecurity. Not just stops, mitigates, which means okay, we still got hit, but it's not nearly as big of a problem, right? Like one thing that I'm thinking about is okay. So you have these HVAC systems and you have these point of sale systems, right? They're all on the same network, all one flat network, right? So attackers gain access to HVAC, they then pivot to the POS systems, okay? Pretty common. Now, think about the data structure, right? You have all these POS systems with all of this information, 40 million credit card and debit card numbers. Why isn't that data segmented from the POS systems themselves? Right? Why does each point of sale system or a single group of POS systems, why do they have access to that much data? They should be segmented not only on their design, but they should be segmented from a data perspective in terms of how much they have access to. So whenever we make that call to the database to pull in information, right, that is the thing that the database is the one that has all that information. Right, the POS systems, they should just have whatever they have locally. We should be a much smaller subset than 40 million or 70 million customers worth of data. That's not a good idea. So segmentation should not just be about the devices and the design of those devices. It should also be about the data. There should be data segmentation in the environment to prevent, even if it does happen, it prevents that large of a leak from occurring, which mitigates damages, which mitigates things like overall cost, legal fees, settlements, etc. Okay, may not stop it entirely, but it will 100% without a doubt mitigate it. Spend a couple million extra dollars a year on this problem, and those types of problems go away. That $200 million issue is now mitigated down to something like, oh, I don't know, 20 million, right? 10x or even more. And that's Target swallowing a $20 million settlement is not nearly as big of a deal as a $200 million settlement. Okay. So hopefully that made sense there. We have a couple questions that are going to come from the audience here before we end it, but I just wanted to say thank you for training with Netcom. My name again has been Logan Hillard, and I hope that was a good representation of where the current cybersecurity landscape is. Just in the real world in organizations, and also what IT certifications to go for in 2025. Again, I wanted to show all that stuff in terms of where the organizations are, where cybersecurity posture is right now, so that you can kind of have a better understanding of what you need to focus on when you get into the industry, right? Because it's not just about the certifications, it's also about what am I going to do when I get there? What am I going to focus on? What matters? right? So hopefully that was a good representation of that for everyone. And again, I want to say thank you for joining NetCom.
Thank you, Logan. That was very informative. I know everyone is looking forward to the Q&A session, so go ahead and start putting your questions into the question panel. And while you do that, I'd like to give the presentation rights over to Nikita Singh, our Deputy Manager of Product Marketing, to introduce our promotions and webinar-related courses.
Thank you for extending the opportunity to speak with the audience today. I hope the session was informative and it added value to your learning experience. You can watch the event recording by clicking the Access Recording button here. Now, I would like to highlight Netcom learning capabilities and why we are the best when it comes to training and learning services. Recognized by Microsoft as the winners of the Partner of the Year awards 2 years in a row, 2023 and 2022, we excel in guiding organizations to achieve peak performance while addressing their challenges through comprehensive organizational learning solutions. Our dedication since 1998 has led us to service over 80% of Fortune 1000 companies and served 100 plus US military bases. We have trained over 1 million professionals and helped 36,000 plus organizations achieve their business goals. We have a huge portfolio of more than 3,300 certified trainers who are subject matter experts in their domains, and our dedication to providing customized learning methods is why we are awarded as the top 20 IT training companies by trainingindustry.com. At Netcom Learning, we are dedicated to empowering professionals like you with the knowledge and skills needed to excel in the ever evolving field of cybersecurity. We have curated a portfolio of cybersecurity courses that are designed to cater to a variety of professional needs, from foundational knowledge to advanced security practices. Each of these courses is designed to boost your credentials and prepare you for the challenges of securing modern IT infrastructures. Whether you are looking to start a new career in cybersecurity or aiming to advance your existing skills, Netcom Learning has a path for you. Alongside these courses, we also offer valuable marketing assets to enhance your learning experience. We encourage you to explore these courses and resources on our website. Please check out the handouts for detailed information on each course and links to access the training and blog. You can also take advantage from Learning Passport, which is Netcom Learning's solution to flexible team training. It is designed to be customized for the number of learners you train on top technology vendors like Microsoft, Cisco, CompTIA, Adobe, and more. The single package can be redeemed for over 4,000 plus official courses with a validity of 12 months. To introduce you to Netcom Plus Learner subscription, which is complimentary for all the attendees, and Netcom Plus provides you access to more than 400 e-learning courses across various technologies and vendors. I would recommend you all to visit Netcom Learning's website for more information on courses and certifications, free virtual events, our latest blogs and ebooks, and promotional offers. If you want to build a smarter workforce and drive business growth, I highly recommend you go through the book Building an Innovative Learning Organization by Russell Sarder, CEO of Netcom Learning. You can easily find this ebook on Amazon. And for the latest updates on IT and business training, follow us and subscribe to our social media handles. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for guiding us through that information, Nitika.
And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into our question and answer session.
What certification do you recommend for cybersecurity professionals to get first?
That's first of all, that's a great question. I would really recommend focusing on cybersecurity as if it was its own language, right? So you have to think of cybersecurity as its own language, just like almost anything else. If you go and train for like being a doctor, for instance, right? That's a completely new language. If you're going to try to be a doctor, you can't just speak the same words that a doctor uses. They kind of have to meet you where you're at in order to have a conversation with you. But whenever they talk to other doctors, they're speaking at that higher level language. It's a lot more complicated, right? So this is the same thing. Cybersecurity is a new language. So the language exams are the ones that you need to focus on the most first. And that's going to include things like the Security Plus or even the CEH or the Pen Test Plus. Remember, those cover the same thing now for the DoD. I recommend the Security Plus as a really good beginner cybersecurity certification because it gives you that language to be able to then go on and have that conversation with other people in the industry and to be able to talk about, well, this is what I think matters. These are the things that cybersecurity focuses on, et cetera, et cetera. To be able to have that conversation is extremely important. That's what you need to focus on, okay? Is can I have that conversation with other people in the industry? Can I understand and explain to other people what matters and what we should be doing? Okay. So, and all that starts with things like the Security Plus. So start there and then move into more technical certifications like some of the Microsoft certs if you're going to go that route. Or even the Cisco certs could be a good option if you're going to focus more on networking. Some really good options there overall. Okay.
What should an organization be doing to defend itself properly in 2025?
Another great question. The best way to answer this question is proactive cybersecurity measures, right? We're not just talking about reactive. We're not just talking about hiring some SOC analysts. We're talking about performing red team operations, getting a pen test done, getting audited, validating your cybersecurity posture by getting some unbiased third-party red teamers, some attackers into your organization to validate your cybersecurity posture. Beyond that, something like threat hunting. So maybe an advanced blue teamer or making sure you have threat hunting platforms to perform threat hunting from. Many EDRs support this, but some SIEMs also support threat hunting platforms as well. Microsoft Defender XDR and Microsoft Sentinel both have threat hunting platforms, for instance. Things like CrowdStrike also have it. Cylance also has a threat hunting platform as part of their EDR solution. So all of those, they really are the best ways for an organization to defend themselves because you should obviously be using EDR, you should obviously be using reactive SOCs and having people monitor for alerts and things like that. But even further, you should be getting pen tests and you should be performing threat hunting, looking for attackers that are in your organization that you have not seen yet. If they've bypassed all your tools and you haven't seen them, how are you going to see them? Right? If you don't have visibility, if you don't go looking, how will you ever know? You won't. You will never see them if you don't ever go looking. So any organization that's not performing threat hunting, in my opinion, is not really doing it properly, right? They're doing a reactive SOC rather than a proactive SOC. And again, anyone who's done any level of sports, you'll understand the reactive versus the proactive. If you proactively go for a ball by moving in that direction before the ball is played, 9 times out of 10, you'll beat the man that you are playing against, even if that person is faster than you. If you move before they do, you will likely beat them to the ball, right? That's proactive versus reactive in sports. And that is the exact same reason why it's important to be used here for cybersecurity. Right? So again, great question there. That's what I recommend an organization do in 2025. Prepare yourself by bringing in red teamers and performing threat hunting in your organization.
Which certificate is the best value and which is the hardest?
So that's a good question. Definitely. I'll probably have to think about this one. So which certificate is the best value? The CompTIA certs are a great value because they're cheap, right? You can pay for them on your own. They're only like $250 to $350 a piece. And so they're definitely reasonably priced. That may seem expensive, but for cybersecurity certifications, they're actually pretty cheap. And again, it gives you that good bang for your buck because it teaches you the language. So that's the best value answer. But which is the hardest? That's probably going to be in like the CISSP range, or if you go for some of the more complicated certifications, things that we didn't really cover because they're more red team like practical certs, things like the OSCP, the PNPT, and the CPPT. Those certifications are definitely some of the harder certifications that I know about. There's also a subsection or a section of certs from SANS, if you've heard of them. They have some certifications. The one that I know about are GPEN and the JEXPEN, GPEN and GXPN. Those two certifications are very difficult, very hard, but they cost a lot of money. Something like $6,000 to $10,000 per certification, per exam. And again, they are that expensive because they are that good and they are that difficult. Okay, so don't take those without getting some training. Get a mentor to kind of lead you on that process. If you want to go for the hardest exams, those are going to be some of the hardest, alongside some of the ones like the CISSP, because it just covers so much material. CISSP is like how to prepare to become a CISO. Like, you should be able to have a conversation with almost anybody and understand how those teams need to be able to interact with each other and how they can bring cybersecurity posture, improvements to your organization individually and as a whole, right? So the CISSP is definitely a broad picture on that, which is very important.
How can I get leadership on board with cybersecurity and the value that it brings to my organization?
Great question. Fantastic question. What I learned, and this is what the CISSP really teaches you, what I learned is that you need to be communicating with leadership in their language. So what do I mean by that? They speak in terms of monies, right? Of dollar signs, finance. So let's say that we have a risk, and that risk is like it's classified as a high risk. Okay, and you could say, from the technical perspective, a high risk just means that we need to respond to that risk within, like, I don't know, 2 weeks. We have an SLA, a service level agreement, of 2 weeks. Whenever there is a threat found and it's categorized as a high threat, we have to fix that problem within 2 weeks for us to be like internally compliant with our own policy, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So that's from a technical perspective. Now, from a leadership perspective, we need to think about that in terms of money. So a high threat, a high risk, you could associate something like, it really depends on what it gives you access to. But let's say that it gives you access to like names and emails. Okay, so that's not that big of a deal, but it could be construed as some sensitive information. Maybe you could say that risk is something in like the hundreds of thousands. If you think about settlements and things like that, potential risk, right? So you put a number on that, and then you say, okay, if we fix this by rolling out this cybersecurity control, or even these cybersecurity controls, by hitting it multiple fronts, right? Defense in depth, we mitigate that risk down by something like 90%. So instead of a risk assessment of something like, I don't know, $250,000 over the course of like, 3 to 5 years, which would be, $75,000 to $50,000 of risk per year, we could mitigate that down like 10x, and so now your risk to this is only 5,000 a year, and now we're fine. So if you had like sometimes organizations actually develop these cybersecurity funds for, hey, we know that something's going to happen. Hey, we know something's going to happen. Let's put some money to the side, and let's make sure that that we can pay for anything that is going to occur, right? If something does happen, let's make sure that we can respond to it, right? So they may set aside $5,000 a year into that fund because of your recommendation, and that's how we get those types of things approved. Like our ROI on that cybersecurity threat, if we implement this, yes, it may cost us this much money, but we may actually save money by implementing these cybersecurity controls. Instead of having to put aside $50,000 a year, let's mitigate that down to $5,000 a year. If it costs us $15,000 to implement that cybersecurity control, and our risk is 5,000. That's a combined risk of 20,000. Our initial risk was 50,000. So our leftover risk is only 20,000. So we've mitigated $30,000 of risk per year. We are saving money. You just spent $15,000 and now you're saving $30,000 a year. Well, that's an ROI of 6 months. You see how that works? That conversation was for leadership. That wasn't for the IT people. That wasn't for the blue teamers. That wasn't for the red teamers. That was for leadership. And people in that role, in those CISO, those CTO roles, the people who are leading the cybersecurity conversations for leadership, sometimes people in the GRC roles, the governance, risk, and compliance roles, sometimes those people have to have these conversations. They are very much responsible for getting that point across to leadership for them to actually accept it. Because without this type of conversation, leadership is not going to be on board. If you just say, hey, can we get $15,000 approved for the budget? They'll probably say, well, what's that for? What's the point of that? Right? Why would we do that? And if you can't show why it's necessary for your organization to make those commitments, then it's not going to make any sense to them and they're not going to see any point to doing it. So you have to speak their language, ROI and monies. All right. And I really hope that that makes sense, guys. Those are some great questions from the audience. I really appreciate.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave this session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.